Hey everybody, what up? It is Scuffy here, and today we're going to do ourselves a little look at the Iron Warriors card pool. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, the Iron Warriors are, I mean, you're going to have to excuse this video. I've got the light on above me. It's shedding the light of the Golden Throne. The Iron Warriors are one of the new legions that have joined the game just recently in the last month, actually. And what they bring to the game, let's open up free crate here. Hang on a second. What they bring to the game is the siege mechanic. That's their big thing. Iron Warriors are big on vehicles. They're big on structures. They're the siege masters. They are the counterpart of the Imperial Fist. What they hold, the fortifications, they fortify or they tear down fortifications. That's really what they're good at. And the nature of the Iron Warriors is brutal. Iron within, iron without. You know, that's their weakness is not allowed. It's not tolerated. It's something that's kind of frowned upon. And at the same time, it is used to kind of strengthen the morale. So, let's just view the collection here of the Iron Warriors, all cards. Let's get into this. So, currently, the Iron Warriors are newer to the game. There have not been any errata. We're just now seeing at this point in time the Night Lords have just joined the fray. We're a week into it, and in 7 days, the Extermination event will take place, and that is the Set 3 expansion will fully be released. Those card crates will be available. So at that point in time, we'll see about 20 new neutral cards enter the fray, and then I would expect at that point in time, any of these cards, in addition to the future card or the existing card pool, might see some errata. And I've held off doing a card by card, but it's been a month. These guys have been out for a while. There's nothing terribly broken about them. I think they're pretty interesting. They're hard hitting and they play in a different style. They're still aggressive, but they're a different kind of aggressive. So I think most of the cards we're going to be taking a look at and talking about today, I don't think they're going to be massively changed, although there might be some improvements made to different abilities. But I figured it was due for a card breakdown. So let's go do it. Let's take a look at Horus first. He's the current warlord that I've been running with decently. I was playing him almost exclusively in free play prior to the Alpha Legions coming out, and then since then I've been doing more Alpha Legion than Iron Warrior. But I do like them. I do like the Iron Warriors playstyle. They're not my favorite Legion, but they are a fun deck to play. So Forex's ability is a 2 energy. He puts in play a Barricade. Now let's see if Barricade is on here. I don't know if this is because this card, Barricade, yeah, it's not. Barricade, is it in the neutral side? Barricade is a neutral card. It might be a common that comes available. There it is. Okay, it is there. So he's paying 2 energy to put this in play for free. It's a 1/3 frontline, can attack. There's not a whole lot to that on its own merits. It's a little buffer. It's a frontline troop guaranteed with his ability. You're not going to get anything offensive out of it, but if left unchecked or when needed, if you need to throw up a front line, he has the potential to do that. And there are a lot of troops in the Iron Warriors card pool that you kind of want to have them behind barricades to properly use them or to build them up to what you want to prepare for. Now, Narek Drager, he is currently not in a good spot. His ability seems interesting. He's got Survivor 5. Okay, that's fine. That goes with his theme, with his story. He was badly wounded and during the drop site massacre, but he did manage to survive. However, in the course of that battle and through his wounds, Perturabo was displeased with him and saw weakness in him, so he's always kind of looking to redeem himself in that regard. But his ability is he's to create a random Iron Warriors vehicle in your hand. Now we're going to look at the Iron Warriors vehicles down the road. They have a lot of them. They're not bad. They're not bad vehicles. But his ability is kind of what's holding him back, because as most vehicles are, they're high cost cards. So he's paying 2 energy now to get a high cost card that he won't be able to use until much later down the road. So ideally, if any Iron Warriors see any Iron Warrior cards see some changes, ideally he will be one of those that does, and maybe either his ability would be a 0 cost, or for 2 energy he creates an Iron Warrior's vehicle in my hand for cost -2, similar to Abandoned Supplies. Something to kind of break that, because otherwise he's paying an additional 2 energy, in addition to, especially early in the game, giving up the potential to put something down. So that definitely does limit the playstyle of a Draeger vehicles deck currently. But I think he's got potential to improve, and then outside of that, a Iron Warriors vehicles deck, as you'll see, can be a pretty big powerhouse right now. So, and then Perturabo. Now, this is all cards. I do actually have a Perturabo. If you're familiar with the Iron Warriors crate opening video, the epic fail that was, I did not get any legendary cards in all those crates, and that actually turned out at that time that was like 0 hour of the event of the Legion crates being opened, and there turned out to be a disbursement issue with legendaries. So I was able to contact support of the game. I was compensated with 2 legendaries of my choice. I've since gained, I think, an additional legendary. I might have 3 now. So don't have them all, but Perturabo was my first go-to. You want the Primarch. You want to be able to build around that. He's got a great ability. So his ability is a siege ability. Now siege, as it says here, ability needs to be prepared by using it once without effect. So first turn, he pays 2 energy. What he's doing is he's not dealing the 6 damage right away. He's readying his ability. So then you'll see on his character, on his warlord, his energy icon will turn red to indicate that he's got a siege ability ready to go. The next turn he can pay, or the next time he uses the ability, he'll pay 2 again, and then he'll deal the 6 damage. And that can go to anything, to his own troops, to warlord, to your opponent's troops, to himself if he really wanted to be wacky with it. It's a strong ability. I mean, that's his rage. It's his Perturabo is not one to withhold. I mean, when he hits hard. But it takes some time to prepare. So basically, what you're really doing is you're paying 4 energy to deal 6 damage, or you can think of it as paying 2 energy or 4 energy to deal 3 damage a turn if you were consistently cranking it out. The best way to use Perturabo is not really to deal out his ability every turn that you can, but to ready it and have that 6 damage on hand, so when your opponent plays a big beefy troop, you can level it quickly. Or if you want to use it as a finishing blow, there have been games I've played with Perturabo and I've used his ability just once at the end for the 6 damage. It really just depends on the scenario and on what your opponent's playing, but if you want to be smart with it, that's probably the best application for it. Otherwise, you risk falling behind by just using his ability. You still need board presence. Now, his Whispers is interesting. Let's take a look at his Whispers down here. His Whispers of Chaos. Now, you'll notice that its cost is 15 currently. And again, this is one I wouldn't be surprised if it changes somehow, but I don't know. I don't know yet. I mean, it can happen, but it's not. Most Perturabo builds, this is kind of just a side effect of playing them. So it's -1 cost when a friendly Iron Warriors troop dies during your turn. Whether that means you kill them on your own with your own tactics, or you run them at the opponent's warlord or front line. That's trickier to do than it sounds. It sounds like that might be easier to do, but realistically, if you think about it, it's not. Typical games, you're using what you have at your disposal on your turn, and you're leaving it weak to either be finished off by your opponent on their turn, normally, or in those odd situations you might have one left over and then you use it and get rid of it. That's in the minority. The majority is normally you're leaving them in a weaker state and your opponent uses their turn to finish off whatever you've got in the weakest state. That's normally how the game flies. In this scenario, there are some troops here that, as you'll see, follow that same theme in terms of having your guys run at the warlord and deal damage on your turn and kill themselves, as opposed to on the opponent's turn. It can be done, and his whispers, I totally scrolled up past that. Jeez, I forgot to look at his transformed form now. His transformed form, boom, he goes up to 3 attack, like everybody does except for Korax. Not bitter. And then he's got, now his ability becomes a siege ability. Siege, put in play an Iron Circle. So instead of dealing the 6 damage, now what he's doing is he's putting in play one of these guys. He's putting in play an 8-cost troop with frontline that attacks by itself at the start of the turn, and it's an 8/8. Okay, all right, that's pretty good transformation. And if your opponent can't do anything about that, or if you have got your ability previously prepped, it's still ready, and then you can just execute it after transforming your whispers, then right off the bat, instead of dealing 6 damage, you have yourself an 8/8 frontline, and then you just go from there. That can quickly they're both two sides of the same coin. They're just, one does it a little bit differently, and the other one at least offers you some frontline protection. But those Iron Circles are not to be scoffed at, especially if you can pump them out every other turn. Now, Dreadnought Squad, these guys are very basic. This is not a siege ability. This is just a basic 2 energy put and play a bunker. Now, I like the art on this. I like the art style, personally. It's a little more, it's comic booky, but it's got the good dark and the shadows. Put and play a bunker. Now, the bunker is the neutral. That's the 3 energy 1/5. So the bunkers these guys are putting in are better than the barricades that Forex is putting in for the same cost. The difference is, obviously, is these guys aren't on demand. I mean, they're troop. You have to draw them. You have to play them. They have to survive. And then you can use the ability. And then on top of that, if you put too many bunkers and barricades in play, you really risk limiting what else you can put. And depending on the matches right now, there's situations where you don't want to make an entire wall of bunkers. That doesn't do you any good at all. I actually fought I was playing Alpha Legion just as a quick distract story. I was playing as Peck with Secret Orders, and I faced a Forex, and I don't know if he was new or he thought that he was just fortifying his position. Through the course of the game, he put out 5 barricades, which left him room for 1 troop, and he put down Havoc Squad, and we'll take a look at Havoc Squad in just a sec. But with Secret Orders and with Peck, that's all I needed. And I put a bunch of Secret Orders on that one guy, and then he couldn't put anything else out because all his barricades had filled up his whole slot, and the Havoc Squad just basically chewed him up to death. You don't want to wall yourself in too much. You want to leave yourself a little bit of room. Thankfully, there are other troops in the list here that are frontline and that are offensive as well. Now, the 5th Support Squad, I like these guys. These guys are good. They're cheap. They're easily disposed of. Yes, they don't have more than 2 health. But keep in mind that there are a lot of frontline options with the Iron Warriors, so their survivability is a little bit higher than what you might see in some of the other legions, like Raven Guard or the Sons of Horus. So these guys are at the start of your turn, or the end of your turn rather, deal 2 damage to a random enemy troop. Now, if you set the board right, you know exactly what troop they're getting because they only have 1 troop left. So in a way, it's a little bit of an opposite end to Kabant Squad. Kabant Squad's a rally, deal 2 damage to a troop. These guys here are at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to a random enemy troop. Now, Kabant can be used to purge your own ranks and get rid of a troop with a secret order on it. These guys are just enemy troops, but it's also guaranteed, so that's nice, and it's every turn. Decimation. Now, Decimation, on, again, great art. Some of the Iron Warriors art is just amazing on these cards, and they're off of the Black Library books, but they're good stuff. So Decimation on the surface doesn't look great. 2 energy, destroy a friendly troop. Why would I want to do that? Give +1/+1 to starters and infantry in your hand and deck. Is that worth it? The answer is yes. Decimation works extremely well if you get it early on, especially with Forex, who is guaranteed to give you a troop out of his ability. More importantly, it's a very low level, not highly functional troop. Okay, it has its use for a turn or 2. Maybe you've got 2 barricades and one of them's got 1 health remaining. You play Decimation on it, get rid of it, that's fine. But now your entire deck, as well as the cards in your hand, just got better. And you can play that twice. And that really adds up. When you start throwing down some of these cards that are +2/+2 as they come into play, that really adds up. Decimation is not to be overlooked. It's a very good common. You obviously have to keep it in mind with what you're building, what you're relying on. Do you have a lot of troops to go with? If you don't have a lot of troops and too many tactics, then maybe it's not the best way to go. You do have to keep that in mind. But if you can pull a Decimation off on turn 3 and follow it up maybe with another one turn 5ish, you're ready. Goldstones at 5/5. Goldstones at 5/5, and as you'll see here, there's some other cards that make those 5/5s into potentially 10/10s. So keep that in mind. I shouldn't say 10/10s. I should say 10/5s, 10/4s. Yeah, you'll see. Harsh Discipline. This is one of them. So Harsh Discipline gives Bloodthirst and deals 1 damage to friendly infantry or Astartes troop. And Bloodthirst lets that unit act twice. So for, let's say, late game, 2 Decimations have been played. I've got a Goldstone that's a 5/5. A Goldstone. That's 5/5. And I play Harsh Discipline, and now he's a 5/4. But he can act twice, and he's unstoppable. And now I just did 10 damage for 5 energy. And that's just a 2-card. It's technically not a 2-card combo. I guess really you could say it's a 4-card combo. But Decimation is your entire deck. It builds your entire deck in your hand as well. So if they're sitting in your hand, you're useful. And Harsh Discipline gives that Bloodthirst out. And that 1 damage, it's not. It's worth it. It's worth it. You don't want to give it on a troop that is not going to be able to take that second action, especially if that second action is an attack, or if it has 1 health. That's a waste of a card. Harsh Discipline is also really good on troops with siege abilities, because Bloodthirst lets them act a second time, which means you give them Bloodthirst, they can activate their siege ability and use their siege ability in the same turn. It's paying twice, but you're getting the immediate results, and that means that you're getting those results every turn now as opposed to every other turn, and that's important. Harsh Discipline works really great with a couple of the troops here that you'll see they've got a little bit higher health to begin with, and their siege abilities are really good, so not bad. And that works for infantry and Astartes. It doesn't work for vehicles, so keep that in mind. Olympian Recruits, this is just your basic common. I would strongly suggest not including these in a deck if you have them, if you can replace them. I just noticed the Decimation expansion symbol. Nice, like it. There's cards that generate this card, just kind of in the same way that we talked about in the Iron Hands card by card, that there were some cards that created cards in your pool, and having those cards created, the need to include them in your deck is not as high if you can just create them outside of your deck, especially just a standard troop that doesn't have any ability to any text or anything like that. If you can, these should be one of the first ones to replace, and I would actually replace them with these guys. They have a lower health. Instead of 3 health, they've got 1 health. However, as a rally, they put in play a barricade. So this is a troop that right off the bat is giving you a second troop. And yes, it's a fortification, but that fortification potentially makes these guys stay alive a little bit longer. It keeps your warlord a little bit longer. Turn 1, you can drop a Rakra squad and a barricade, and you've got a front line. Turn 2 with 4x, you put out another barricade. Now you've got 2 barricades for 4 energy, as well as a troop. And then, 1 energy to play around with. Maybe put Dreadnought squad out there. Maybe that's overkill, I don't know. But, I mean, just things out there. There's a lot of ways to put up walls with Iron Warriors. They like to put up walls. There's a lot of ways to do it. Now, superior firepower, it's an option. I like it as a destroy a troop card. The destroy a troop with 3 or less attack. So it's a little bit more specific. And initially, 3 or less attack seems doable, but late game, this card loses some punch because most of the cards that have 3 attack or less are either one-shot wonders or goldstones, and they've done their damage, so there's really no point in destroying it. Or you want to get rid, like you could use this to destroy a Jubok very quickly, very easily on your first turn, and that's great. Or a mortar tosser, that's good. But late game, you're going to get more of those high attack cards out there on the field, and this is going to be a little bit more situational. It's a good card. It's a good destroy card, but it's got its limits, so it's not an auto occlude in every deck. But it is a good card worth considering. Now the 13th Breacher Squad, I like these guys. These guys are a frontline troop. They're not a fortification, so they can act, and they've got a great ability. It's not a siege ability, but for 1 energy, excuse me, they create a 13th Breacher Squad in your hand. So as long as your opponent can't kill these guys on your turn, you can have a never-ending supply of the Breacher Squads. And if you've played a decimation or 2 in the game, these guys are a 3/5 or a 4/6. That's nice. And that deck. Now, keep in mind that the cards that are created by them don't count as in your deck and are in your hand, so they're going to come out as 2/4s. So you've got your big beefy Breacher Squad guy, and then you can start pumping out regular, normal Breacher Squads, who can then pump out other Breacher Squads. Usually it only takes 1. If these are out on the table, your opponent should be smart and get rid of them. If they're not, don't use them to attack. Just have them sit there and make yourself more, because either down the road you're going to want some troops, or at the very least you're going to want to utilize your front line as long as possible. The Iron Warriors really take advantage of utilizing that front line and sitting behind it and building up what they want for just the right blow. Now the Edmund Squad, these guys have got a siege ability, and siege has got that red energy icon. So for 1 energy, they prepare. And then the next turn, another energy, they put in play 2 of those Olympian recruits. And that's just 2, 3 guys. But for 2 energy, over the course of 2 turns, you put in 2 troops. I myself don't like this ability. I think this could be improved somehow. Whether it be free or whether it just not be a siege ability, I don't know. The health and attack of these guys are relatively low. Now, granted, they could be pumped up with decimation. You could improve them, but their survivability for 2 turns is questionable. Even if they're behind 1 barricade, it's questionable. So to get that payoff on it, or to prep a siege ability, you're thinking that you're going to get more guys, and maybe your opponent plays Melgator and returns them to your hand. That breaks your whole chain. You've wasted a turn in using these guys to attack, to prep the siege ability. So it's not fabulous. It's not bad. And there is a deck type that spams that uses the build a bunch of guys, build bodies, and just hurl them out there, but it is not the most effective Iron Warriors deck type, in my mind anyways. Now Olympia is another card. This is a card that creates 3 Iron Warrior Astartes that cost 4 or less, which is basically this entire row here, which starts from these guys all the way down, to the end. And you could get some commons, you could get some rares. You're going to get 3 of them. That's not bad, especially if you are new with the Iron Warriors and you don't have a huge access to the card pool, or you want to go more tactics in your deck and rely on the chance of either putting up a barricade or spawning a vehicle from your warlord. This gives you the option to spawn random troops. The problem with that being is they're random. I utilized this card initially when I first started playing, and then after I went through the pool, I determined what troops I wanted to use most, and I don't use this card as much anymore, because why randomly get them if I have them and I can include them automatically? But if you don't have them, if you don't have the full access to it, it is a good card to have. It's a good option to have. And Precision Bombardment is a good, this is their low damage tactic card that they have, and they have several, which is great, because that's what the Iron Warriors do. They bombard, they blow things up, they shoot, they mortar, they blast, they cannon. They are unforgiving. Iron within, iron without. Deal 3 damage. If target dies, return this card to your deck and draw a card. Now, it's interesting to note that this was the first card that truly interacted with your deck. You've had cards like Jubok that copied a card from a deck. However, this card here is the first card that actually returned to a deck and then allows for a card draw. And through the course of that, it's assumed, it doesn't say it, but through the course of that, you have to imagine that it's shuffled or that your deck is randomized. That's an important step in the game itself. Just having that opens doors to potential possibilities, which when we get to the Alpha Legion, you'll see they followed up on this with a different concept that played onto putting things into decks. This opens up the concept for down the road taking cards from hands and putting them into decks and shuffling and drawing a card. It makes that now an option, which was always there before, but it just hadn't been tapped into. So this is the first card that actually tapped into it, and while you're at it, it's dealing 3 damage. That's good. These, if you can get 2 of them, these are those. There's no reason not to have 2 of those in your deck. Now, this Rhino here, and I like that they're just numbered 3/3, very basic. At the end of your turn, draw an Astartes from your deck. So you're getting a guaranteed troop, so long as you have any Astartes, and it's coming from your deck. It's not copied, it's being drawn. So you need to keep that in mind, because if you're playing this late game, and maybe you've only got 1 or 2 Astartes left in your deck, or if you're playing an all-vehicle deck, you don't want to include this in there because the ability of it is pointless. What's the point? If you're playing an all-vehicle deck, why would you have a vehicle that's going to draw a card that you don't have? Now, Sheathed in Steel is very similar to, I wouldn't say very similar, it's similar to Decimation in that it gives +1/+1 to all vehicles in your deck. Draw a card. Okay, and it costs 3, and that's all of them. If you can start this out and play this on second turn, that's great. That's right off the bat, you're going to get more value out of the vehicles in your deck. You have to play a vehicle deck, and that's tricky. The vehicle deck archetype is not fabulous with the Iron Warriors at this point in time, but it can be. And I don't think this card itself needs to be changed. I think between the Warlord ability and a couple other little small changes, I think that would be sufficient. But this makes that doable. Now, Store Bezak, these guys rally 4 damage, deal 4 damage to an enemy troop at the front line. It's a little bit more situational. And these guys are common. They have a low health. They have a high attack. Decent cost. That's not bad. But if your opponent doesn't have any frontline troops, or you're playing, say, Angron, who doesn't run hardly any troops at all to begin with, then this rally effect is pointless. It's wasted. And you might think, oh, well, I'll just get at least 4 attack health on there. But, with Artillery Strike and all the cards that just deal damage, or, abilities like Loken and Abaddon, Nev, they're not you're not going to really get a lot of value out of these guys. So it is kind of a meta call. If you find yourself as facing a bunch of frontline stuff, if you're playing against Salamanders, if you're playing against Iron Warriors, if you're playing against Colonel Ornitov, these guys are good to have if you're seeing a lot of those matches. If you're not, I would pass on these guys if you can help it. Excuse me. It's hard to talk a little bit louder with a dry throat. Not that I'm like super loud to begin with, and I apologize for that, but that's just the way it is. Now, attrition warfare is the, I think, last in the trilogy of giving things, upping abilities in your decks. And this gives you just +1 health to all your troops in play, hand, and deck. I don't like this tactic. I like the thought behind it, and I think it works in the event decks that it was included in. But for the cost, I just don't like it. I think if it would cost 3, it'd be better. I still don't think I'd play with it. But the 4 cost, that means I at that point in the game, I want to be able to put more things down. I don't want to just up health. I need to have stuff on the table. So, yeah, I'm gonna pass on it. It's okay, but I would much rather just play Decimation. Crandall Squad. Now these guys here they're the Mark of Chaos troop. Most troops have got a troop that gains a Mark of Chaos through some degree, whether it's a rally or, when a troop dies or via perfection or whatever it is. These guys here gain a Mark of Chaos when a friendly troop attacks and dies. So, what's interesting to note is, number 1, they're a 4/4. Okay. Number 2, they play into the concept of the Iron Warriors throwing themselves at the front line. Okay. All right. Number 3, these guys don't just gain a Mark of Chaos, they can gain it whenever a friendly troop attacks dies. So, if you've got 2 to 3 guys late game lined up, ready to go, double gold stones, whatever the case may be, you drop these guys behind them, throw them out there, have those guys die. Not only are they gaining a Mark of Chaos, they're gaining multiple Marks of Chaos. So you could potentially gain, the Mark of Khorne and Mark of Slaanesh. You could gain a Mark of Tzeentch and a Mark of Khorne, which is even better for the next turn. The potential is there to gain more and quickly become a greater demon, and I like that. I like that concept. It does need to be properly executed, and if you're doing Decimation is going to help you. Harsh Discipline might, because you could lower the health of a troop to get them to attack twice and then kill themselves on the second go. But these guys could quickly climb up there, and as a 4/4, that's not bad for cost of 4. That's fairly decent. I'd like to build that deck archetype with the siege breaking, I guess is what you'd call it, but I'm just not there yet. But I like the idea. I like the concept behind this card. Logos is their epic. It's good cost. Your warlord heals 4 and give +1 to vehicles you put in play permanently. Okay, and you can have 2 of those in your deck, and if you can get off 2, you heal 8, and all of your vehicles are now going to come out with +2 attack. That's pretty nice. And again, going into that vehicle archetype, if you are wanting to build a vehicle archetype deck, that's a good way to go. And now, keep in mind, this isn't just Iron Warriors vehicles. There are a ton of vehicles here in the Mechanicum. There are a ton of vehicles in the in the Imperials. Not so many in the Chaos as far as that goes. Delta Omega could come out as a 5/5. It costs 5 too, but stun damaged enemies. You could have your mortar carriers coming out as a 4s. You could have these are the favorites here: the Philesian Infantry, the Philesian 5th Airborne, 5/3 stealth coming out as a 7/3 stealth, which as a play, that's what you can do. I almost forgot to tell a story. Perturabo, I was a lodge member. Skypoint has got a Perturabo deck, and he did something very similar with that. Actually, he had the Perturabo, a lot of these damage cards that we're seeing, Perturabo's ability, and then just playing on the vehicle concept, Logos, and he had the Felician, and then he also had the other one. There's a 5 cost that comes out as 5/4. Let me just find that one up again here. So you got those guys here that we looked at, the Felician, and then you got the Fire Warriors, Firewalkers, and he had these guys in a 7/4 stealth coming out and play. Unless you get lucky with like 2 artillery strikes or high odds on the defense satellites, that's 7 damage you're eating. And then he threw out, so between that and Perturabo's ability, I mean, he just blew me over. And I think I was playing Alpha Legion at the time, and you can't give vehicles secret orders, and you can't give stealth troops secret orders, so it was just eating damage, and the game was over very quickly. And he's beating some Angrons very simply with that concept, because you can see it coming, Angron, and you're healing Perturabo, you're dealing more damage. Angron has to attack, but he can't attack those guys in stealth, and then in one turn you're dealing 13 damage. That's 7 in stealth plus the 6 from Perturabo. That's just, that's brutal. That's high damage. That's the potential of a vehicle's build with the Iron Warriors. It's on the cusp, and I think once we see the new neutral cards with Decimation or Extermination, that's the name of the expansion, as well as the any potential erratas that the game developers are looking at, I think that can become a very viable archetype. It's going to be not for everybody, but it's a good one to think about. Now, Malbone Squad, here's another siege ability. Now, this siege ability is 0, but it's a strong one. Destroy an enemy troop. Now, these are not guys that you want to just throw out first as soon as you can. You need these guys behind walls. Because number one, their health is low. It's a 3 health. So yes, they can still be seeked and destroyed. They can still have some damage assigned to them via like a warlord. But if you can protect them from a 2 attack and a follow-up attack, you have the potential to lock the board down on your opponent. Because now, if you've got like a couple barricades up, these guys can sit back, ready that ability, and destroy an enemy troop on the next turn. And if you are really feeling ballsy, or you've done some decimation work and you do harsh discipline on these guys, they can destroy an enemy troop every turn for free. That's a good trade-off. It's a risky trade-off depending on who you're facing and what your opponent is, but that's a very good trade-off. So if you can get it, again, don't throw them down there without being behind a wall. Don't throw them out there as soon as you can get them. They're much more late game, like your opponent looks like he's played out a couple of cards. Now's the time to drop down the Malbone Squad. And now's the time for Decimation, which I think that's actually an emote from Perturabo. I really hope the game adds a soundboard option, because it would be great just to listen to those things on Win. The Bitter End, I like the idea behind it. Put 2 barricades in play and draw a card. It's like kind of at the end, you're like, if you got nothing else to do, put up a couple of front lines. But I don't like it. Number one, because it's barricades that you're putting up, you're drawing a card, and you're not playing them from your deck, so they're not going to be beefy barricades. And the thing with barricade, as well as bunker, their front line, they have an okay amount of health, but that one attack really is, it's kind of it's okay at first, but late game it's kind of a curse, because what that does is, really, you throw up a barricade and your opponent comes out here and smashes it with a land speeder that normally would have just gone to your warlord and, you would have taken the 4 damage or whatever it was. But now, not only did it not go to your warlord, it destroyed the unit, and now your opponent has got a 4 attack on your turn that you have to deal with. And that's not always easy. That actually sometimes makes it very complicated. So the tactic I don't like. I'd rather rely on dealing damage as opposed to putting up a wall to hold off damage, if that makes sense. Now these guys, I like. These are one of the ones I like to put in my deck right now is the Torbanon squad. Number 1, because their siege ability is just great. 1 siege, next turn siege, deal 3 damage to all enemies. That's powerful. That's very powerful. That's like getting a not a max yield, but a very high yield defensive satellites every other turn. And if you notice, they have a 5 health, which is very healthy. That's a good, healthy unit. So they're kind of ripe for harsh discipline. And then all of a sudden, you're dealing 3 damage to all troops every turn. And if you happen to have played Decimation earlier, now they're a 4-6 or a 5-7. Very beefy. Very beefy guys. These guys are great to sit behind. If your opponent's smart, they'll try to get rid of them as quickly as they can. Or if they're lucky and smart, they'll let you prep the ability, and then they might use a Melgator and return to your hand. But that's just delaying the inevitable. These guys they're a very good unit. I like them. I like these guys too. Now, at first glance, this might kind of seem odd. Relentless, take 1 damage. Okay, rage, +2. Now, rage does something when it's damaged. So it takes a damage, and then it gives itself +2. So you put it out in play, it's a 3-6, but on your next turn, it becomes a 5-5 if it hasn't been damaged by your opponent. If your opponent can't get rid of it, it's going to do some damage. If you happen to have given it Bloodthirst, at the start of its turn, it's a 5-5. Harsh Discipline deals 1 damage, which makes it a 7-4. And then it attacks once, and then that makes it a 9-2, because let's just say it attacked your opponent's warlord. And then it finishes its turn, so you just went with 7 + 9 is 16 damage from 1 troop. That's powerful. Obviously, they're targets. They become a very, very important target for your opponent to do damage to. Your opponent doesn't have to destroy them outright. They just have to do 5 damage, though. Keep that in mind. Because if they do 5 damage on their turn, at the start of your turn, it's going to take that last damage and it's going to kill it. So, that kind of sucks. However, if you've been lucky enough to instill some decimation in your ranks, they're not coming out with just the 3-6. They're coming out as a 4-7 or a 5-8. And yeah, that hurts. That hurts. Now, the 30th Heavy Squad, I just have one of these guys. I haven't been able to use them. I haven't been able to utilize them. I like their ability, though. It's random. Deal 2 damage to a random enemy troop. If it dies, repeat this effect. However, again, kind of to go with these guys up here, the 5th Support Squad, you can have some control over that random. If they only have 1 troop that has got 3 health, and you can bring it to 1 health, and you can do that 2 damage, or if you can bring all of their troops to 2 health, then this is going to go off and off and off and off and off. The problem is it's an enemy troop. It won't do anything against your opponent's warlord. However, these guys do have a 4 and a 6. That's a good stat line for their cost. That's not bad. And their ability is not a siege ability. It's a very cheap ability. It's just a drum-fed heavy bolter, just pumping out, just chugging. So they're not bad. I don't have used them enough to really give a lot of feedback to them. I like the idea of it, but I'd rather go with other cards, with what I've got. Now, I do not have this legendary. It's not a bad legendary. Friendly vehicles have a +1/+, so that's just a straight passive. His energy ability is pretty costly. 5 energy, take control of an enemy vehicle. I don't know how well that works. I mean, as a legendary for 5, that's not a bad card to have, especially if you're doing a vehicles build, because again, as we've seen, your vehicles can quickly become very strong, very powerful, and if they're already on the table and you drop this guy, they become just one notch stronger. But I don't know how the taking control of an enemy vehicle, how often that would come into play, as well as how useful it would come into play, depending on what vehicles you're taking. Now, granted, you take it into control, and also that vehicle gains the +1/+0. But if they're just thrown out, like if they just have a chump vehicle or frontline vehicle, so something just not great, then it's you're better off not taking control of it and just using his attack. I don't know. I'm a little mixed on this guy. I like the idea. I like the concept. I like the power. Don't get me wrong. But vehicles aren't seeing enough play, or if they're vehicles, they're stealth, or they're one-turn, one-shot wonders. The opportunity to use that ability seems less presently. Now, the meta is changing. We've got 3 new factions in the game. We are about to get the rest of the set 3 cards, so that might shift. We might be able to get an all-vehicle builds for a few legions, and if that's the case, this guy here might become a little bit more useful. Now, Contrador, this is the big finish for the Iron Warriors. Deal 7 damage. Add this card to your opponent's deck. Now that's interesting. Again, second card to use the concept of putting things into the deck again. Deal 7 damage. It cost is 5. Now the trade-off is that if you're not killing your opponent with it, unlike Flight of the Emperor or Pride of the Emperor, this card's gone to your opponent, and they have a chance to draw it on their turn and use it against you. So you really hold this off for the killing blow. And granted, with Perturabo's ability, you can do 13 damage for 7 energy, which is actually more than Pride of the Emperor. If you have 10 energy, you can do 16 damage. Very basic, very cut and simple, but brutal. Just... Now, Dominators, good stat line, and these guys play with that theme about killing your troops on your turn. When a friendly troop dies during your turn, this guy gives +1/+1 to troops in your hand. Which, okay, that's okay. Because again, if you kill him, let's say you've got a gold stone in hand, or a beefy vehicle that's been waiting and building up, these guys just make it stronger. However, that ability is kind of counterintuitive to feed into his ability in the future. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not bad, but I wouldn't play with him. As a 5 cost, I'd rather go with this card here, to be honest. This is a second way to finish games. It's strong. It gives Bloodthirst to your units this turn. That's all your units. That includes your Warlord. And that's powerful for 5 energy. And if you've got let's just say you've got these 2 guys out, the Torbon squad and the veterans. Whether it's turn 9 and you've just played just these 2 guys and you've got your Warlord. Without decimation, without any stat increases, as we've indicated, you can do 16 damage with this guy. You can now do 6 with him. That's 22, plus your Warlord dropping another 4 damage on him, not counting any abilities. That's 26 damage, right? Is that what I counted up here? 6 plus 16, 22 plus 4, 26 damage at turn 5. It wouldn't be at turn 5. I mean, realistically, it'd probably be at turn 6 or so, because these guys are both 4 drops. But that's another way to close the game. And that's kind of one way that the Iron Warriors do. They build up those walls wear you down. You can't quite get past them. You can't quite reach them. And then they get 1 or 2 troops back there that you haven't touched enough. And then they bring down the wrath, and they just knock down your wall. They blow it over whatever you got. They pound the face, and you go from having a edge or a decent hold on your opponent to just being blown out of the water. Perturabo's Wrath is a great card. I have pulled 12 of them over the Iron Warriors crates that I opened. 12, I've counted them. 12 copies of Perturabo's Wrath. I'm tired of it. I have a wrath of my own. That is my wrath at this point in time. And I hope I don't ever pull that card again, but I will continue to keep tally of the times I've played that card, or pulled that card. 6/4 frontline. It's okay. It's a vehicle. And it's got 4 health. That means it's very vulnerable to crack grenade. I don't like it. I like the idea. I like the Wolverine claws that it's got there on the art. But that's where I'm going to leave it at that. It's a common. I would pass on other things for it. Viral bombs are another amazing, great little artwork. Great tool of destruction. Deal 2 damage to all units. If a troop dies to this tactic, deal 1 more damage to all units. That continues with every troop that dies to this card, including ones that have died to the additional damage. And that's important to keep note. There's several videos out there of people pulling off massive viral bombs. If you want to take a look and just see how crazy they can get, I think if you just do the math, 2 plus 6 plus 6 does 14 damage, I believe, is how much this card can do. Some things to keep in mind with viral bombs. Number 1, try not to play this card if you are already behind on health, because it won't change that differential. You will still be behind on health. Your opponent's going to take the damage, you're going to take the damage, nothing's going to change. You clear the whole board, but if you're at 5 health and your opponent's at 7 health, you're still at a disadvantage, and that's a big thing to keep in mind. Number 1. Number 2, there are times where you want that extra damage, and in order to do it, maybe you tap one of your guys to attack to drop them into lethal range. Look at the puzzle pieces. Sometimes you count out how you're going to do it. He'll do 2 damage initially, and that'll kill 1 troop, and then he'll do 3 damage, and then that'll be just enough to kill another troop, and then that clears the board. Take a look at how much damage you need to get rid of a certain health unit that's going to cause you trouble. See if you have enough bodies to feed the virus and make that happen. And then number 3, and this is important just for people, because I played somebody who seemed to have forgotten this at one game. They were in Iron Warriors, and I was playing the Raven Guard. If your Warlord is sentenced, he takes 2 additional damage from each of these count as damage in each increment. So it's not just mass damage. He takes 2 from the initial effect, and then he takes 2 from the sentenced, and then he takes 1, and then he takes 2, and then he takes 1, and then he takes 2. If your Warlord is sentenced, don't play viral bombs. If you want to retire from the game or resign, this is a good way to do it stylishly. But outside of that, just don't play it. Oh, and then the 4th one to keep in mind is if your Warlord drops to 0 health, you think that you're going to use this card as like a draw. You've got 5 health, let's say, and your opponent's got 6 health. You drop to 0 health first, you will lose the game. The game doesn't consider that a draw. You're the first one to reach 0. You have to both reach 0 at the same time. In this instance, because each of these damages is a first trigger, and it checks to see if you've died. Once you hit 0, that's it. The bomb doesn't continue. Even if you did 15 damage, 35 damage, it doesn't matter. Once a Warlord's at 0, that's it. So keep that in mind. Rack and Ruin. Again, another damage card. There's a lot of damage tactics in this Legion, but that's what they do. And they've got a straight destroy a vehicle or structure troop, or deal 4 damage to any unit. Now this tactic is a little bit higher cost, but its versatility isn't bad. It's worth considering, especially if you're running like a high damage tactic build. It's pretty good. It's going to destroy vehicles. That's pretty good. Or structures. That's pretty good. And 4 damage to any other unit, including a Warlord. Good. Solid card. Ancient Rend. I like this. I like the artwork. I like the cost. And I like the rally ability. Again, very similar to these guys here. Where was it? Your old Siegebreaker dudes. Stor Berzak. It's situational. There's not always going to be a troop with front line. If you're playing a warlord or a unit or a faction that has frontline, you want to hold on to these guys until they put one out there. But the trade-off that these guys have over the other common faction, the common troop there, is they're 666. That's a strong, beefy card. Even as a vehicle, the crack grenade is not going to kill it outright. It's going to take some sort of follow-up attack. So, very strong. I like them. Iron Havoc Squad. Havoc Squad. After an enemy attacks, deal 3 damage to it. That's a great ability for these guys to sit behind 2 or 3 bunkers. Not 5, but 2 or 3 bunkers or barricades, because every time your opponent attacks to try to clear those, in addition to taking the 1 damage from that structure, they're going to take 3 damage from the Havoc Squad, who's just sitting back there just plugging away. That ability also works against your opponent's Warlord. And another huge thing to note, even though they're a 6 cost card, that 5 attack and that 6 health, again, already factoring in what's earned with decimation. Keep in mind Perturabo's Wrath, because that can become an attack 10 card. Sitting behind, your opponent hasn't been able to destroy them. Even if they're down to 4 health or 3 health, they can still do 10 damage. Now the Predator Destructor is basically, this is kind of the basic stat line for Predators we've seen in the game, is a 7/5, susceptible to crack grenades. Their backlash is they add a Predator Destructor to your deck. So if you destroy it, you're going to get another one in your deck. Okay. Alright, that's not bad. It's not great, but okay. Forge Breaker. I don't have this one. It's a very basic, I want to say basic, but as far as legendary goes, it gives +2/+0 to your Warlord for 7 energy. So you can turn your Warlord into a 4 attack. Okay. If I had it, I don't know if I'd include it in every deck. I think, honestly, and I like war gear. I like upgrades, especially legendary upgrades are usually very neat. I think Forge Breaker is probably the one legendary that is situational in the faction, that is probably the least go-to. I would probably rank that as the lowest of the legendaries, because even Gorgor, who we'll see in a moment, he's got instant access. Forge Breaker is kind of a high cost. If I have 7 energy with the Iron Warriors, I want to be able to use siege abilities. I want to be able to drop vehicles. I want to be able to drop troops behind my front lines. I want to be able to play Perturabo's Wrath. I'm not as interested in increasing the attack of my Warlord. And going back to the Warlords, now we don't have the 4th Warlord yet for the faction. Hopefully it's Barbarous Dantiok, but maybe it won't be Dantiok, maybe it'll be somebody else. Draeger is definitely low rank right now. We expect to see that change. I like Forex, but I think with the new factions being the Night Lords and the Alpha Legion, I think Perturabo is still spot number 1 for the Iron Warriors Warlord choices. And then we'll see how that changes. So Land Raider 23-2, these guys, it's a high cost card. It's a 7/7, 7/7. But it's a beefy vehicle, and it gives +1/+1 to troops you put into play. And that's huge, because it's not just troops that are in play. It's hard enough for them to deal with that 7 damage, 7 health. It's harder still if it happens to be behind a couple front lines. And then it becomes really hard and frustrating if on your next turn you drop 2 to 3 troops that are also now +1/+1. And keep in mind, if you've played Logos a couple times or Decimation, that 7/7 could be an 8/8, it could be a 9/7, it could be a 10/7. I mean, the opportunities are endless. It's a late game, it's a 7 cost, but going into that vehicle build, it's very powerful. Now these guys here, I've been able to use this siege ability 1 time, and it was really fun. It's very powerful. They're costly, and they're Astartes. They're not vehicles, so keep that in mind. But they're frontline. Their siege ability rallies for 0, which is great because they're frontline, which means I can use their siege ability and I don't have to feel like I'm giving up anything because I want them to sit there to block. And then their next turn, they're launching those cyclonic missiles, and they're dealing 3 damage to a random enemy 3 times. And if there's only one enemy on the table, like your opponent warlord is going to eat 9 damage for 0. That takes technically 3 turns to prep because there's the turn they come in, there's the following turn, and then there's the next turn. Keep that in mind. But if you can make that happen, that's a good payoff. So Erasmus Golg, and this is who we talked about. Golg comes in. He's got a rally, and he's got a relentless. Now his rally and relentless are kind of interesting. He's giving +2/+0 to troops, but he's also dealing 1 damage to them when he comes into play. And it's just to your other troops. It's not going to increase him. He's kind of the taskmaster. He's whipping behind the barricades. He's raising people up and telling them to get in there and smacking them around a little bit on their way out the door. But I like the artwork. I like the picture. I like the ability. I like the fact that as an 8-drop, he might not be useful himself, but his effect is useful right off the get-go. You're getting something out of him. That's good. I'd like to see that. And we've kind of seen that with some of the high drops that are in this expansion. When we do the card by cards for the Night Lords and for the Alpha Legion, you'll kind of see that. But that's good. That needs to be the case on these high drop legendary cards. They're one of. They cost a lot. There should be an immediate effect to some degree in the game for you, and he offers that. Iron Circle. We've already looked at these guys. These guys can be created by the chaos, the swayed chaos of the Lord of Iron. I was trying to think of the name. The Lord of Iron, the transformed Perturabo. Price of Victory. Now this one I don't like. I like the artwork. The artwork is amazing. But draw 3 cards when a friendly troop dies to reduce the cost of this card by 1. So early in the game, if you start the game with this, just keep this in your hand because this is guaranteed to drop to like free. But all it's doing is drawing 3 cards. And that's what I don't like about it. It doesn't do... I mean, I think a lot of the legions now that we've seen, and we'll take a look at some of the cards down the road, but some of the legions have got ways to draw 3 cards or draw 2 cards. This lets you draw 3 cards, but I don't think the Iron Warriors need card draw. Not that they, lack it, but I think through the pace of what they do, I don't think drawing cards is gonna really doesn't feed into anything else that they do. If you find yourself using this to draw 3 cards, take a look at what else is in your deck. There's better ways to draw cards if you absolutely need to. I think, more importantly, I think you're taking slots away from cards that could just actually create cards or give you options as opposed to just drawing cards and not doing anything else for you. And then we've got here this beast. This beast mode is just epic. First off, it's a 9 cost, which is high, but it has flank, which is really good because it's a 7 attack and it's a 9 health. So even if it comes in and it can't attack your opponent's warlord, it's going to destroy something, whether it's something in the way or a frontline troop or the guy that your opponent thought that you just didn't have enough health, or Argus Braun. I mean, it doesn't matter. This thing is just going to take things out. And if it doesn't, if there's nothing to destroy, or you're playing like a mono warlord, then you come out and you can right off the bat use that siege ability and prep it. And then your next turn, destroy an enemy troop. So either you destroy a troop the turn that it comes out, or you destroy the troop the following turn right off the bat. And your opponent has to deal with that 9 health, that 7 damage, unless they've got a bounce card like Melgator. And again, bouncing this card won't be as effective because you can still just bring it out and do the exact same thing on your next turn. Or a destroy card. It's a beefy thing. Now, I wouldn't put as a one of in a deck, maybe. Maybe with the vehicle decks that might see down the road, maybe as a 2 because it has flank, and that's really good. I mean, just flank in general on that high of an attack, not a whole lot is safe. And then finally, we've got Latrathis, and this is I think one of the highest health cards in the game right now, as an 8/12. I don't know if there really is another. Gosh, is Hell's Fury even that more? Really quick, just for my own curiosity. 5/12, Hell's Fury. I think they're tied. I think they're tied for the healthiest. The healthiest cards in the game. 12 health is epic. No, it's your full energy. But look at that siege ability. And if you can prep and pull off that siege ability, 3 turns later, dealing 15 damage to the enemy warlord, more power to you. More power to you. That's hard to do. I think there was an event deck with Latrathis, and it's a little bit easier in event decks because there's not as much removal, there's not as much hard counters, there's not as much like fast stuff where that doesn't matter. But it's just hard to do. But the payoff is pretty nice. 15 damage. So there you go. That's that. That's the Iron Warriors. There's a lot to it, and you know, there's a lot to talk about. I think we'll see some changes with the Iron Warriors cards. I don't think we're going to see a lot of changes. I think we're just going to see just enough of what we need to, and then they'll go from there. Now, there's already been talk. I think the Salamanders will probably be the first Legion to get some more changes in mass, just because they need it. But the Iron Warriors are just brutal. Their style is mass damage, attack damage, or frustrate, delay it with the walls, build people behind the walls, and then bring down the Wrath and the Hammer, and then just pound face. I'll tell you, when you're playing an Iron Warriors deck, if you happen to have Perturabo's Wrath, and you've got four or five units on the board, barricades or not, it doesn't matter. When you play Perturabo's Wrath and everybody gains that bloodthirst border, that red border, it's intimidating. I kind of wonder what it's like on the opponent's side, because I haven't played against somebody who's done it in that degree. But it'd be nice to just get that feeling like, oh yep, here it comes the pain, here comes the wrath, and that's exactly what happens. So a couple different ways to play them. I think we'll see more. I think the vehicle option is right at the cusp. I don't think it's right there. I think the important figure is really getting Draeger online and getting a couple of these vehicles a little bit more in line with ease of play, and then I think we might actually see that build take off. But otherwise, the Iron Warriors have a lot of potential. They have a lot of potential for damage. They're not to be underestimated. I think they're very capable. But you have to use your right cards in conjunction. Don't just go willy-nilly. If you're trying to build with some cards that do frontline stuff, and some cards that do siege stuff, and some cards that do the gain benefits when you kill yourself against the opponent on your turn, that's too much. You're mixing your bags. You've really got to pick, this is what I'm doing, and stick with troops that are going to foster that. If you're going to do siege and frontline, that's great. If you're going to do wrath and bloodthirst and guys who kill themselves and you gain stuff, if you're going to try to go for the whispers, go for the whispers. Don't hold back. Because Perturabo wouldn't like that. That's weak. Iron within. Take the iron within. So, alright guys, that's it for me. Thank you for listening. Keep playing Legions. Next time we'll be planning on doing the Alpha Legion card by card. That's next. Or maybe, actually, probably in the next 7 days, I'll tell you what we'll probably be doing. We'll probably be doing ourselves some crate opening for Extermination, because that is coming up, and I've got enough there for 134 crates, and I am probably going to buy 134 crates. You better believe it. So, alright, keep playing Legions, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.